Thanks everyone for joining us today for our MLB Modernizes Business Intelligence webinar. My name is Josh Parento. I'm an outbound product manager here at Looker, part of Google Cloud. I'll be your host and moderator for today's presentation. So with me today, I'm very happy to have George Calvo and Joseph Munsami at Major League Baseball. And we're going to discuss three topics. The first is how MLB modernized their BI journey. We're going to talk about the benefit of migrating to a user-friendly modern BI platform. And then we're going to talk about how to interact with data to improve decision-making and ultimately for MLB, the fan experience. We're just about to start, but I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started today. We're going to have a 15-minute Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but feel free to send in questions during the presentation as well. I will do my best to moderate or to monitor the questions that come in and ask as many as we can throughout and at the end. To ask a question, type your questions in the Q&A box and just click send. Second, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording after it's over to all attendees. The windows on your screen are customizable, meaning you can minimize them, maximize them, move them around as you see fit. If you accidentally minimize or close a window for any reason, don't worry, just click the toolbar and at the bottom of your screen to bring it back up. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started. So let me give George and Joseph an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into the presentation. So Joseph, let's start with you. Just give a quick overview of your role at MLB.
Hey everyone, I'm Joseph Munsami. I lead the business intelligence team here at Major League Baseball. Our team is part of the larger data engineering group here, and I've been with baseball for about 12 years now.
Excellent. And George?
Hey everyone, my name is George Calvo. I'm an engineer on the business intelligence team. Been on the team for about 4.5 years, and was excited to get us onto Looker and exploring everything that Looker was able to give our team in terms of our business intelligence.
Awesome. Well, super happy to have you guys. And you've done a lot of stuff for Looker and Google, so we're really glad to have an opportunity to dive into your story. I mean, BI modernization is a huge topic for a lot of customers. Before we get into yours, if you could just give a little bit of background and talk about your legacy deployment of BI. Before you modernized, before you switched to Looker, what did your BI deployment look like? What was the team construct? What were some of the things that your BI deployment was responsible for? I don't know who's best to take that, but just like to get some context before we start.
Yeah, I could take a stab first. Just a little background on our group first. Our group functions to collect and organize online fan transaction and interaction data sources from various sources, and all of this information is stored in our data warehouse system, which allows us to streamline and automate reporting and analysis on our various products, and also helps with our executing targeted marketing campaigns. I mean, when I first started here, we started with one of the major you could say first gen legacy BI tools, and with these tools, a lot of people just go into the portal and run ad hoc canned reports, or they'll get emailed reports out to them. Not that much data discovery, but a lot of number-driven reports.
Excellent. And I'm assuming you've had your legacy deployment in place for a while, meeting the needs of those types of customers through, it sounds like, mostly distributed reporting. Is that right? It's something you've built over a long period of time, I would assume.
Yeah, we've had it for a good 10 years here now.
Okay. What were, I guess, sort of thinking about the modernization journey and kind of what prompted that? What were some of the pain points or challenges you encountered with your legacy deployment?
Yeah, I can talk to some of those. The legacy deployment in terms of developers, a lot of the troubles that we ran into were a little bit of a clunky interface that we would use, where the interface would crash a lot and everything was GUI based, so drag and drop, not too much code writing. And in the middle of writing some code as a developer, program would crash, it wouldn't allow you to save, and you'd lose all the work that you did. So that was a pain point for me while using it. And then from a user standpoint, just the portal that our users would log into looked like it was something from the past, which it was, and it just was not updated. to look like a modern user interface. So we did get many complaints about that, as well as just way of accessing data was not easy. You'd log into the portal, you'd see your report, and that's all you could get. There was no way to drill. There was no way to explore your data further than just what you were presented in the user interface from this legacy tool.
And was that something you heard? I'm assuming your customers came to you with those types of complaints around maybe performance or just limitations. Is that something you heard on a regular basis? They wanted to do more, but just couldn't.
Yeah, they wanted to do more.
Yeah.
And I had come from a company that was using more of a modern, it wasn't Looker, but more of, second generation modern BI tool. So from a developer standpoint, I kind of knew some of the benefits that were there in more modern BI.
Yeah. And these are, I think, pretty common things that a lot of customers and a lot of organizations can relate to, right? Just dealing with some of those frustrations. And I guess what I'd like to kind of get some just depth on is what was the last straw? Like, I think a lot of companies deal with that. They deal with the fact that they know they're not satisfying customer needs. They know their internal customers are frustrated. They can't do all the things they want to, but they kind of just stay the course because migration's hard. It's, it takes a long time and you spend a lot of time building what you have. Like, for you guys, what was the last straw where you said we just need to do something different?
Yeah, I mean, we knew we needed to get better at our reporting, to like get more visual with our reporting, just make it easier for the users to ingest the data and take their insights from the data and let it be more actionable. And I think we had a project here where we had to like share granular level data with the 30 clubs, and we wanted to be able to throw a BI tool on top of that, whichever technology we decided to use. And the technology the data eng team decided to use is like not supported by our legacy BI tool, and that opened the door for us to like start looking around and exploring different tools and the second gen, next gen BI tools, and see what can fit our profile and like can get us to use our investment with our data warehouse instead of putting everything into memory for some of these tools that are out there now.
Got it.
Just kind of like building on that a little bit. One of our main focuses for that project was having a better user experience. So we wanted a tool where, first of all, users were comfortable logging into the tool and navigating it. But kind of second on top of that, and maybe even more so important, was that we wanted our users to be able to create their own content, get familiar with their own data. Our clubs are, specific, and they know their regions best, where a lot of their data they use to market. They know their fans the best. So we do centralize a lot of their data at the league, but we want to also be able to, give them the flexibility to create content that's specific to their region and their club, where we don't have to take that onus on our BI team to have to do that ourselves.
Right. So it sounds like you guys have kind of created a central hub for data where that's kind of become your role, right? Your role is curating, I would say, a trusted sort of centralized data environment, and you let the 30 clubs do their own self-service to the extent that they want to and can. I would assume that varies quite a bit across the teams, where maybe some have, more skills than others. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of it? Since you're pushing self-service on them, how much variation have you seen across the teams, and how have you kind of dealt with that training aspect?
Yeah, I can take that one. We do see a large variation amongst the clubs, whether it comes down to skill levels, budget. Some have the budget, some don't have the budget to dedicate to analytics and business intelligence. Some are very into their data, so it varies. So we all wanted a model that was flexible, that kind of worked for everybody. We make it known that us centrally at the league, we're here to help in any way possible. But we also kind of caveat that with, we don't have the staff or the flexibility ourselves to individually maintain 30 sets of reports for each club. So we kind of wanted a solution that would meet in the middle. And I think the key to that transition from our legacy tool to Looker was just our availability, whether it was training, taking side-by-side reports from our legacy tool to Looker, training on exploring, even training if the need was there to do their own LookML development. Just having that availability for our BI team, it's not something easy to do, but it was something we identified early on in our transition that we were going to need to be available to help with this transition, especially if, we're centralizing BI, but we also want to push that down to some of the clubs and our other internal users at MLB.
Right. Got it. I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts of how you actually did the migration, because again, that I think is something that a lot of customers view as really complicated and challenging. But just even before that, when you were evaluating options to migrate to, how did you approach that, right? Because I think a lot of people have sort of a legacy mindset when they think about modernizing. They don't really know what criteria to use or what approach to use. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the evaluation process and how you went about that when you finally decided that you needed to modernize?
Yeah, we wanted a reporting tool that would connect to these modern data sources. And these days and times, like, you need to connect to the big queries, the Athenas and everything. And like some of these legacy tools do not connect to that. So we wanted a tool that first and foremost to connect to these modern databases and be able to run reports off of them. And we wanted to have like a semantic layer where we could maintain our data governance and like just improve where our reporting from being numbers based to be more visual. Like we wanted getting visual was the main focus. I think some of these legacy tools like visualizations is not the forefront of the tools, but I think that was the main thing we wanted to do. And we wanted to be easy to navigate portal, like George said, as well as connect to our existing infrastructure with version control, whether it be GitHub and single sign-on with Okta to make it seamless for our users.
Got it. So I was going to ask, how you ended up on Looker, but it sounds like a lot of those things you just mentioned around, the semantic layer, easy interface, Git integration, all those things are I'm assuming what sort of led you to Looker. I want to talk a little bit about the semantic layer piece, because that's something I think people who've been around this industry for a while, it's kind of a loaded term. And a lot of legacy tools have a semantic layer. A lot of tools do. Obviously, Looker is built on LookML. What in your experience and in your evaluation, what did you guys find different with Looker's approach to semantic layer versus what you may have been accustomed to with the legacy tools that you've seen and used?
Yeah, so we had a heavy emphasis on a strong semantic layer because we do a lot of data transformations post-load. So data's in our data warehouse, and then us and the BI team are responsible to do a lot of the transformations to get the data ready for reporting. So the approach we've been told by some BI tools in the past was, handle that in database views, handle that, here's a third-party vendor that can handle that for you. But we wanted to do it all in one place. Makes it easy for maintenance, makes it easy for tracking. And Looker having their semantic layer or modeling layer all code-based was huge for me. I know at first it can be something that's a little scary or intimidating, but the flexibility that a code-based modeling layer allows is huge. When you have a UI that's just drag and drop, you're limited to what drag and drop provides you. When you can go in there and you can write your own code, the flexibility is endless. Especially, it's not just SQL code, it's not just LookML you can write. You can inject Liquid to do even more, fancy stuff that you can't just do out of the box. So really, when I was doing the POC of this and writing the code in the modeling layer, every time I hit a wall and said, okay, I can't do this, there was always an answer to say, okay, but you can do it doing this. And when you don't have that code-based modeling layer, you're stuck with whatever the user interface provides you. And also with the semantic layer being in code, everything is version controlled. So, if I make a mistake in my LookML, hopefully it doesn't happen too often, but does happen sometimes. Joe, my boss, can go in there and he can see, George made a mistake on this day, and we can either roll that back, we can discuss what happened. And that's just something that's not available in our legacy tools. Somebody made a mistake, or somebody could overwrite somebody else's changes while, if we're working on two of the projects at the same time. And that was huge for us, really sped up development and allowed us to kind of handle any issues that came up, or even just do code review, as simple as that. That was really
cool. Review is a good point, because we could have other teams look at Mel, and we can make it so that our team like peer reviews it before we push it out and everything.
Awesome. Is that like the teams are doing are the teams extending the data model? So you've got that central LookML layer, they're extending it with their own whatever they want to do that's unique to them? Is that a pretty common thing?
Yeah, we've implemented kind of a pseudo hub and spoke model where our more technical users, both in-house at MLB and outside of MLB, we've given the access to have their own project within their LookML, where, again, like I kind of stated in the beginning, is we're not the experts on all the club's data, but we're also not the experts on, let's say, for example, our marketing analytics data or our software engineering team's data. And some of these teams are very technical and very interested in their data. Giving the power to them to say, here's a safe environment where you can write your own LookML, but you can also extend the LookML that we already have created, so those business definitions stay the same, and then you're just creating new business definitions based on your specific data, really took the need for the BI team to be involved became less, but also gave these teams the flexibility to create their own data quickly and change it when needed, and then create their own visualizations on top of that.
Awesome. I'm looking at the Q&A and I see one question. It's sort of related to, kind of what we're talking about, maybe even a little further upstream. But the question is, how does MLB get data from all the various sources and legacy tools to the database, to BigQuery, for Looker to run reports again? So I guess it's more of like a data movement, ETL, data consolidation question. You guys touch on that a little bit. I think you said you have a data warehouse, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about kind of what that looks like, it'd be great.
Yeah, like our data warehouse is BigQuery, and now we have a whole data engine side of the team that their job is just extracting the data and loading it into BigQuery, and they are very versed in Python and use Airflow to orchestrate all those data jobs now. They were in a similar boat like us, where they had a legacy ETL tool, but they migrated to more of a modern thing like Airflow.
Okay, cool. So there was you guys have modernized the entire stack, really everything from the way you move data, how you store it in a warehouse, and then obviously what you're doing with it on the front end. Cool. Yeah,
even including, like you said, even including the warehouse. We were also on a legacy data warehouse that we migrated to BigQuery. So, we did this all within a span of, probably a year plus.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
So there was a lot of maintenance for us in migrations, but after that was complete, the benefits have been huge.
Yeah, awesome. One other question I just saw, do you guys use Looker instead of, a traditional kind of data mart for whether it's a specific use case? I don't know if you ever use data marts as part of your strategy, but question around that. So maybe if you can touch on that for a quick sec.
I mean, we're using Looker for all of our reporting needs now and everything, like hitting BigQuery.
We never really had any data marts to begin with, but our clubs are able to get their own data in BigQuery, so they have access to their own. We've created views for them for BigQuery our BigQuery tables that we do share with them as part of this project that we've used Looker. So they have the option to get their data from Looker in terms of visualizations or downloading any data that are provided in the visualizations. Or if they're interested in writing some SQL, they can go into BigQuery and they can extract the SQL from there, or write any processes that they want on their end to pull the data from their BigQuery tables.
Got it. Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about what I think, a lot of companies sort of wrestle with. And we've talked a lot about the back end, right? We've talked about all the business rules you were using in your legacy tool, and you basically rebuilt that or reinstantiated it in LookML. The front end, I think, is where, a lot of people get tripped up because they say, well, I have all these reports in whatever tool I'm using, and how do I replicate that, or how do I move it over? So I guess my question is, like, there's sort of two mentalities you can take. There's a lift and shift, which is you try to take everything you have and recreate it, or you sort of take an opportunity and re-engineer your approach, or really rethink your approach to BI. What did you guys do? How did you make the decision on what your migration strategy was going to look like?
Yeah, I think we took this migration to a new Looker as we viewed it as an opportunity to just get better at our reporting and everything, like get better so that the data is easily ingestible for our users. So it wasn't lift and shift. We took an inventory of all our reports. We decided which ones were like high levels, which ones have to look exactly the same. We worked with our individual users and departments to figure it out. What data points, what metrics did they actually need to see, and if they needed to see in this exact look and feel in like a PDF format where it gets emailed out, and we worked with them. And I think for the most part, we got, surprised, George can say this too, like surprisingly, we got a lot of them to like change their ideas of how they want their reports to look like, in more modernized feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's all business dependent, right? Like, so if you're working in a business where you don't have time at all to do migrations or talk to your users, then, maybe that's going to lead you to take one approach. But, if there are other companies out there that are thinking about doing the same thing or in the same boat, I really, really can suggest taking this as an opportunity to, one, kind of reevaluate your approach, but two, talk to your users. Reach out to those that are using your reports and say, like, are we getting you what we need, what you need with what we currently have? And just maybe the answer is yes, and they want something exactly the same, but at least you've taken this as kind of an opportunity to, check in on your users, build that relationship with your users. And I'd be willing to bet that they'd be willing to work with you and modernize that approach a little bit and get your data to be a little bit more visual, take advantage of some of the benefits that Looker provides with drilling, with exploring, and, build that relationship and work with them. That would be my suggestion for sure.
Yeah. In our legacy BI tool, we emailed a lot of our reports, so we didn't have that audit capability on email reports to see how many people are actually using these reports. We just blasted as so many people, and so we had that discussion to figure out, are these being used? If so, who is using them and why are they using them? What metrics do they really care about in these reports? And we can work with that and get better reporting and work with them. Like if they need it as a PDF, like exact pixel perfect, we can work with that because Looker gives us the flexibility to add custom visualizations, which George has done a tremendous job here in doing, to add that, to get that as close as possible to the old look and feel of the reports.
So it sounds like from a just change management perspective, what you guys were proactive with it. You were engaging your business partners, stakeholders with, hey, we are trying to improve things for you. It's going to potentially look a little bit different. But we're here to partner with you. It sounds like that's the approach, and it sounds like that's worked really well. I'm assuming, though, there's still, there's probably still some resistance, right, with people who are just used to getting certain things that look a certain way, and that's all they care about. How are you encountering that? Did you encounter that? And kind of what's your advice for companies that maybe are dealing with that, where that becomes a barrier for changing, where there's just people who just don't want to change?
Definitely. We encountered that for sure, and we still encounter that to this day. And, starting with that relationship building that I talked about before, work with the user, I would suggest. Show them, maybe mock something up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but show them what you have now and what it can be in Looker. But sometimes it just comes down to the point where it won't change. They don't want it to change. And I think what's so cool about Looker, and this is essentially what allowed us to completely move off of our legacy BI tool, so where we have no reports there anymore and all our dashboards are in Looker, is that customization that Joe mentioned to create your own custom visualizations. So if a user comes up to us and says, we had a visualization in our legacy BI tool that we need to look exactly the same as it did in our legacy tool, and there's no if, and, or buts, we're not going to work with you. We want it exactly like this, and we need it exactly like this. I can go into Looker, I can write whatever JavaScript, CSS, HTML that I need to make it look exactly like it did in our legacy BI tool. And we did have, we have a few users or teams at MLB that wanted their reports to look exactly the same, and that's exactly what I did. I took the time to write that custom code, just regular web development, and created those visualizations to make them look exactly the same. So we compromised when we could. And when we couldn't compromise any further, Looker still provided that flexibility for us to get something that they needed.
It's awesome. What are so when you and so far we've kind of talked about getting people over and either giving them what they had or giving them something better and more modern, but part of migrating and modernizing is doing things that you couldn't do before. All right, you either didn't have the bandwidth because you were busy doing report requests or whatever for your customers. What are some just examples of some things that Looker's enabled you to do that you just couldn't before for any of those reasons, technical or bandwidth?
I think like the ease of use of Looker has helped tremendously with us. Like in the legacy tool, we were the main developers of reports. Like we built all the reports. Like a handful of users would create some reports, but I think with Looker, we've trained users that they can now be the ones developing the reports themselves and everything. And we're here to help them and to guide them and just bounce ideas off of.
Yeah. And something as well for me that's been huge is I understand our users way better than I ever have before. Looker provides out of the box reporting on what your users are doing in Looker, what content they're accessing, how they're using the tool. And then even more so, if you're on your own application, you can have your data loaded to a backend database itself, and then kind of go crazy and Looker creating visualizations based on your own users' usage. And I've really taken advantage of that to see how our users are using Looker, what dashboards are doing well, what dashboards are not, and taking the insights and maybe why one is doing better than the other, or talk to our users. That's been huge for me, as well as all the capabilities that the APIs provide. We're using it more in terms of managing the tool. But other companies, and we'd like to get there one day, are using it to build applications using Looker. Just not something that we really had a use case for, but we'd love to do. But more so using it to write scripts to manage our server and service that we're providing with Looker.
Yeah, that's great. Thinking, shifting a little bit maybe towards kind of the benefits of what you've seen. You've touched on this throughout, but like when you think about your roles as the BI team, the centralized BI team, how is, if you look past 5 years, 6 years, like how has that evolved through this journey? What you guys personally or your team overall, how has that evolved as you've modernized? What new roles have you taken on? What things have you been able to to maybe not do anymore? I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of just the team itself and what that's looked like through the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think like through our successes with different departments and with the different teams, we've gotten on more work and everything. Like people are proactively reaching out to us to get more Looker reports developed for their teams and everything. Like we expand our horizons, I think, a lot.
Yeah, it's become a trust thing with their users. I hear that often where they trust our reporting now. They, just using something I think a good example for a question like this is I got early on is something as simple as adding like a club logo to a report or our own MLB logo to a report. People would say in the beginning, why is that important? It doesn't make anything, better with our data, or I don't get any insights from that. But just having that visual representation makes people want to use your data. And that's sometimes the biggest challenge, is getting people to log into the portal and use what you're providing them. And I think we've seen that trust, just because the data is also better itself and presented better, where our users are willing to work with us more. And we've become more of facilitators now, where we have constant communication with our users, both internal and external. Yeah.
What do you have some example? I know we've got one on the screen. Just sort of thinking about ROI and benefits of modernizing on Looker. Do you have some other examples? Just as you think about the benefits or return on your investment, the things that are quantifiable. Those are always kind of good to hear. I see on the screen, you're able to do reporting faster, 2 to 3 times faster than you were previously. Other examples you guys can talk about that you've realized through this modernization effort?
I think we just gotten better at like putting all our reporting in one location. Like we have our like web analytics reportings and everything that people just prefer to go to Looker instead of the source web analytics reporting tools, and they just like the look and feel of Looker better. It just makes, they trust Looker more, and they're able to see their numbers better.
I'm looking at the Q&A, and I've got a question here. Maybe you guys, this is sort of related to the business benefits piece, but the question is, what is the greatest application of BI among the 30 teams now? And maybe looking out into the future, like where do you see the biggest benefit? Is it in, business kind of financial operations, performance evaluation, statistical analysis, customer experience, or elsewhere? Like what are some of the biggest, I guess, opportunities you guys see as you look ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we deal mainly with like the fan interaction and transaction data. So that's like the email marketing data, the ticket sales data, their website usage data as well. It's like that's where we're seeing like teams getting to better understand their fans in general and their trends that they're seeing across our different products.
Awesome. And I guess one other, this goes back a little bit to some of the, I guess, centralization components of how you guys have deployed Looker. But the question is, coming from a dispersed sort of enterprise, are you guys getting pushback on sort of your role as a centralized team when it comes to data management versus teams saying, well, I just want to do it on my own? Like, does that come up for you guys, or is it pretty well established that it's a hub and spoke sort of model, and you guys are the central team? I'm just curious on that point.
Yeah, MLB as a league kind of established that a long time ago, where the league was responsible for centralizing the club's data. There are sets of data where the clubs manage themselves and are individual for the clubs we have no insight into it, but the majority of their data we centralize, and we really don't get a ton of pushback for that. I think it works well because we're able to see things across 30 teams, and the pushback that we did get there was, can we have access to our data? And that was the project where Joe mentioned, where we said, maybe it's time to modernize a little bit, and let's use Looker to give them access to their data where they can explore, they can drag and drop columns like, they're in Excel or any other tool, and create their own visualizations because they know that data the best. So I'd say that is definitely the pushback that they got is, we know you have our data. Can we have access to it as well? And we were able to do that from a database or data warehouse perspective with BigQuery, and then from a BI perspective with Looker as well.
Great. Want to get a little bit into just maybe some of the challenges that you encountered. Like, what are some of the things as you went through this? And we've talked before, and I think you guys took sort of a use case by use case approach to this. It wasn't a big bang, we're going to modernize everything tomorrow. It was use case by use case. But what are some of the challenges, or maybe just advice to people who are thinking about going down this path? What are some of the things that you saw? How did you resolve it? And what would be some of your advice to folks who are considering modernizing?
Yeah, I think we did a subject area based approach where we did individual subject areas at a time, and like baseball as a whole was moving a lot of stuff in-house. So we just had that forefront to say like these new data sources are going to be in Looker, and this is where you got to get it from. And then we did subject by subject area go to that. And I think personally, like the Looker support was a tremendous help for us as developers to help us. Like support has been awesome with Looker. We've been able to, they have that chat support functionality where we can quickly chat with somebody and get us a resolution right there and then, or if not, they'll escalate it up into like an official support ticket and everything.
Also, for companies that are interested in Looker, during your proof of concept or, whatever arrangement is worked out with Looker, you will be assigned a sales representative as well as a sales engineer. And that was great for me, as a technical person. Any question that I had during my proof of concept, I was able to go to that engineer, somebody who is technical that knows Looker inside and out, and say, hey, I have a question about this. Can you help me? And that was something that we did not get in any of our other proof of concepts or in our legacy BI tool. And really
from a legacy tool where we had no support to support it.
Yeah, support really anytime that we needed it, whether it was chat support inside Looker, tool, which we still have, or that sales engineer when we were working on.
Yeah, if something wasn't supported in Looker, they would work with us. I think that was the biggest biggest draw to us too. They worked with us. It was like a collaboration with us.
That's great. Great to hear. In terms of how, and you guys are obviously technical, and you know, it sounds like you took a lot of this on, if not all of it, yourself. But did you use any third party or consultant or even our professional services to do this migration, or was it literally your team just kind of picking off projects and eventually migrating off legacy onto Looker?
Yeah, we did everything internal for the most part. Like, yeah, I just feel like I'd rather my team learn. They had to learn eventually, and instead of like with the consultants, you have to like teach them, and then you have to do knowledge transfer, and it just takes away. I feel like from the whole process.
Yeah, we did leverage the professional services a bit, mostly to come into our Looker instance and see what we were doing very early on to let us know kind of, are we following best practices? Are we doing anything that you don't suggest before we get a little too far down the road and we're in trouble and we can't change things and we wind up kind of where we started? And that was great for us too. You know, mostly everything we were doing, there were some things where he suggested, but most things that we were doing were on track, and it just helped to have that confirmation from somebody who knew Looker a little better than we did at that point.
Yeah, right. What about just, I guess, learning curve, right? Coming from a legacy tool onto Looker, you know, you guys obviously were managing a semantic layer-based tool, you know SQL. So I'm assuming, and to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming the learning curve for your team was not that big, right? I'm assuming you picked up Looker pretty quickly. Best practices and all that, certainly, you know, leaning on professional services and the, you know, solution engineers for that. But is that true? Was that your experience where it was pretty easy to kind of translate your legacy deployment to Looker, even though there's kind of a new language in play?
Yeah, I think us being very technical and being very SQL savvy, like changing stuff to Looker.ml was not that difficult for us. And I feel like the Looker had a ton of documentation that was readily available as well. Like the discourse.looker was a huge help for us in the beginning when we were migrating to Looker.
Yeah, having that community there, you know, most of the questions that we had were already answered somewhere else.
Okay.
Also something that we didn't have for our legacy tool.
Got it. And what about the clubs? Do they, in terms of just, you know, training and enablement and, hey, we've got a new tool now, did you guys handle sort of that aspect of it? How did they learn Looker?
Yeah, right off the bat, and I do see a question here about some of the reports or dashboards that are, you know, most interesting to the clubs. And that is the approach that we took. We said, you know, if we're going to make this migration, let's start with some of the dashboards that they use the most and they're most interested in to see if this is something that they will be interested in and how we can work with them with that. So, for example, we have a dashboard that displays success or failures of email campaigns in terms of marketing. You know, how many people are clicking on some of the emails they send out, how many people are opening, what ticket revenue was driven from certain emails that we sent out, so on and so forth. And that was always our most used report in our legacy tool, and we figured the same thing would occur in Looker. So we took the time right off the bat to first develop something that looked similar but was more modern in Looker, and then set up some training sessions with the clubs. And we split it out over 2 weeks. We had some training sessions where we did like, you know, beginner training where it was, you know, here's where your dashboards live. They look like this now. And then we took it to the next level, you know, intermediate/advanced, where, you know, here are your dashboards. This is how you explore them. You know, the data you start with in your dashboard is nice, but you want to, you know, get a little bit more granular, get a little bit more specific to your club's needs. You know, you can click this button and you can open up a portal where you can generate any insight that you want as long as the data is there for it. So we definitely did a lot of training, and I think that was huge in terms of our transition. And again, gaining that trust where, you know, this is brand new. It's a brand new place to get your data, but it's better and it's going to work for you better because of these reasons. And It was pretty seamless, the transition, maybe I think even more so than any of us expected. And I think it all comes down to how powerful Looker is as a tool. I think everybody who used it realized that right off the bat, that we were moving to something that was better. And from there, you know, you can't really complain.
Awesome. Did you guys, and you touched on this a little bit, but just, sort of thinking about the different types of users, do you see, or did you see, or do you currently see people sort of moving up in terms of maturity and how they're interacting with data? So, maybe you had a bunch of users who were just casual, there may be viewers, they're consuming content. You hope that they want to do more over time where, maybe they're interacting with the dashboard, maybe they have a question that the dashboard doesn't answer. Are you seeing that where people are turning more from viewers to maybe explorers and they want to discover data? Has that been a benefit of, of this modernization and moving to Looker?
Yes. People are going into Looker and exploring the data and answering their questions ahead of time. I mean, before we would get tons of ad hoc questions and we would have to do the exploration and get the answers for them. But I feel like now with Looker that we made it so drillable and the dashboard's flexible enough where users can answer their own majority of their questions themselves.
I think the word of mouth around the company has been, great for that, where, we hear all the time, I know this person, or I saw this person at his or her desk exploring their data in Looker. Can I do that? And just, something as simple as that has kind of grown those that are either exploring their own data, or also those that want to write their own LookML and manage their own model, which we are all for. It's just a different approach, right? Like, it depends on how you look at it. Some will look at it as, we're trying to push our work off on others, but that's really not the way to look at it. The way I think to look at it is we're empowering other users to, one, understand their data better, and two, take us out of the loop so they understand their data better. And if there's any changes that needed to it, we don't need to set aside time. We don't need to create a Jira ticket to track that. They can just go in there and they have the power to do it themselves. So, one, they get the data they need, but two, they also become more data savvy because they're in there managing their own data.
Yeah. I guess a related question I see here in the Q&A, and it's kind of twofold. So, after users are trained, do they require kind of an ongoing training in your experience? But I guess more specifically, in the example of the users who are moving up that, they were just consumers, now they're explorers, and now they want to actually do LookML. Do you certify users? What sort of level of trust do you have to have in a user who wants to do that, kind of basically what you guys do for an individual club?
Yeah, I think we take it on a case-by-case basis. We see how open they are to learn LookML, how technical they are as well. I mean, we're always here to help people as well. We have an open Slack channel where people can ask all their Looker questions and somebody on the team will answer it and help guide them as well. So we treat it as a case-by-case basis on how far advanced they need to get with their Looker skills.
Yeah, okay. And GitHub and version control is a very powerful thing where, we can set it where they can make no code changes without us reviewing it. And it's not to the point where we have so many users that are writing code where we can't manage that. We're at the point where we can manage that, and we can at least put our eyes on it to make sure they're not doing anything that's really bad or really wrong with the data. And, like I mentioned before, we centralize a lot of the data. So all they have to do is pull in something that we've already created, and then they can just build upon it for their own use cases. So a lot of that code they don't even have to write. They can inherit from what we've already written.
And have there ever been scenarios where something developed at the club level has been promoted to the central model, where maybe there was something that, some transformation or some field or something that seemed to start out as a club specific thing, but you guys look at it and say, well, no, everyone should have access to that. Does it ever kind of go that way where you are promoting things to your ownership from the central layer?
Yeah, definitely. All the time. Where, some things are specific where it's just specific to that team that's developing it and there won't be a use case around MLB, so we'll let it live in that project. But there are also cases where things will be written, and this has just happened recently. It was actually written by one of our consulting teams that we work with, that we've given the power to write their own LookML, where they created some dashboards that were great for our club users in particular, where we promoted that from their own project that we created them up to something that we have centrally at the league. So now it's a centralized code base where anybody who wants to use it can then inherit it from us.
Awesome. Couple, I guess. So we've got 15 minutes left. We've got tons of questions here, so I'm just trying to pick out ones that I think go into maybe a little bit more depth than what we've talked about already. There's a couple questions around sort of how you guys think about security and maybe permissioning because of the central model. And I'm assuming, you want clubs to see their own data and not necessarily other clubs' data. How do you guys handle that within Looker?
Yeah, I could say briefly, we do a combination of like different service accounts, BigQuery service accounts, as well as like Looker data groups to do row level security.
Yeah, when we first moved to Looker and that project to share the data with the clubs, this is the first thing that blew me away in Looker, was where you can set a data set in BigQuery or a schema in another, or most data warehouses, what you would call it, at runtime. And that's originally how, and still how we manage our club data, where if a club user logs into Looker, they're assigned what's called a user attribute, so something specific to their user in Looker. And we can write in our LookML, so every query that's generated on their behalf in Looker starts with their club as the schema. In runtime, dynamically in real time, set at the connection level in Looker. And that was quite amazing, where we don't even need to put row level security on their stuff. They can query their own tables, which helps from performance because they're not querying a table with 30 clubs data in it. Helps from security because that data is not even there. But we also do have the ability in Looker to create row level security, and we do that for data sets where we don't have it set up that way.
Got it. Question around governance. So the question is, we also democratize the use of our central data lake. It's worked really well. What governance do you guys apply around how people are using the data sets and the dashboards themselves? So how much oversight do you guys have over what the clubs do downstream of you? So do you monitor, manage their content, any modeling that they do downstream? Where do you draw that line? How do you manage that?
I mean, I would say we just monitor their stuff that they're using. Like George brought up the part that with the Looker backend, we could create our own dashboard to see uses by the Mets or uses by the Yankees users and everything, and see what reports they're using and what's the heavy queries that are being used. And if we find something that's really heavy, then we'll reach out to those individual users and talk to them about what they're trying to do and see what optimizations can be done.
Got it. Question around, I think, sort of testing and promoting, I think. So the question is, what is the process if the data isn't in LookML? It would be in the database, but I'm assuming if the data is not centralized, to test and integrate changes in models. So how do you guys sort of do testing and validation of changes in LookML before actually promoting it? Is that sort of the change control aspect, George, that you talked about? Maybe touch on that a bit if you can.
Yeah, partially that, and then another thing that brings to mind that Looker is so great is Looker in itself has a development mode where when you're writing your LookML, any changes to your dashboards in that point that are connected to your model are not changed for the end user. They're local on your user's instance on the Looker server, where I can go in there and I can change any LookML I want, but it's not live until I go through the whole GitHub version control process of pushing that out, getting code review from somebody else if that's what we decide is needed. In terms of bringing data in from the data warehouse, that's something that we can do if we decide, it's data that we should control and somebody says, hey, we have some data in BigQuery, can you bring it in for us? Or again, we can give that team, if they're technical, enough access to do that themselves and manage their own data. So it's really that flexibility where we can manage it really how we see fit and then promote our changes once we have them in development mode, once they're reviewed. And what you can even do, which we don't take advantage of in Looker, is they have ways automated testing in your LookML where you can say, X criteria is met or not met after you make your LookML changes. We don't do that, but I know a lot of other companies do take advantage of that, and that's powerful for them.
Another way we help users bring in their own data is we leverage Google's connected sheets, where you can have a Google sheet feed into a BigQuery table, and then we'll join that up to our existing BigQuery tables, and users can see any changes made to the Google sheet live on a Looker report. Like that's the Google Sheet integration is a very powerful thing for like configuration data that like a finance team might have for their data. They want to classify certain fields, something else. Like that's really powerful, I think.
Awesome. There's a couple questions around, I guess maybe sort of future, where you guys are going from here. One is just around machine learning and kind of what you're doing or thinking about in terms of machine learning. Along those lines, tracking the sort of fan experience, right, in the ballpark. I know you guys have talked about that, but what are some, to the extent that you guys can share, just what are some of the things that are in the works you guys are excited about in terms of projects like that, as you look out over the next few years that you're looking to embark on beyond the, we've already modernized, we've got, sort of the self-service model in place. Now we want to do more. George, you mentioned like building applications with, leveraging Looker's APIs. Are there some just maybe high level thoughts on kind of where you guys see this going next?
Yeah, I could talk about like the machine learning. Like our team, as a BI team, we don't do the machine learning. We work with the different teams here. Like we work with the data science teams here that do all the machine learning. They'll create their models and everything. And then when they get in a right place where they want to share that data with other people in the org or within the 30 clubs, then they'll work with us to get that into a Looker dashboard so that people can see the performance of the different campaigns and everything.
Yeah, I think I can maybe safely give a little example of that where we've been working very closely. We have a very big data science team at MLB, or baseball data, they call themselves. And something we've recently worked with them pretty closely with is they're always running some tests on something like MLB.com where, they have a test group A, a test group B, they're running A/B tests, and they're implementing things using machine learning to say, what content can we surface to different sets of users based on information we have for them if they're logged into our site. And we've worked with them to kind of give them, they do have LookML development access, and they are able to bring in the data that they're receiving in BigQuery as results from these tests, BigQuery and one of our tracking vendors. And they're able to visualize and say, hey, test A was better than test B, so we should roll with this, or vice versa. Awesome.
Couple minutes left here to ask a few other questions that just came in. We talked about version control a lot on the LookML side, on the modeling side. Any concept of version control on the queries or reports and dashboard on the front end that you or the team employ?
So I think, at least in my experience, operate differently from a lot of companies that manage SQL and databases, where maybe a year or two ago, we moved to a model where everything that we have in terms of SQL code is version controlled in GitHub. So from the DDL, from your create table statement to create a table, to any view that's created in the database, all of that, we don't just have a view that lives in BigQuery and that's where the only place where the code lives. If we want to make an update to a view, we're making that update to code and then committing it and pushing it up to GitHub. So I think that's kind of unique to us. At first, I think we were all a little scared of that and how much time that was going to add to development. But I think it's maybe the best change that we've ever made since we've been here, obviously, except from moving to Looker.
We have version control on our views now, and then we can see who's made changes to the view logic and everything now. It's been pretty seamless since we've gotten more comfortable used to doing it.
Okay. Yeah, and then in terms of dashboards, what is available in terms of dashboards, we don't use it, but you can create what's called LookML dashboards. So what that is your dashboard is completely code-based, and you write it in your LookML like you would write your modeling code. And if you do it that way, then your whole dashboard is also version controlled, so you can track any little change that's been made to your dashboard. Not something that we do, we decided it just wasn't for us, but a lot of companies do use that and leverage it.
Yep, awesome. Is all of the data that you're using, is it all centralized, or are there other data sources that that you need to leverage as part of the model? So is it just Google data in BigQuery, or are there other ancillary sources that you guys need to pull in, and how do you deal with that if so?
Yeah, we connect to other data. Looker supports many databases and everything. I think Postgres is one of them that we use for like some of our real-time reporting on like like sales data and everything.
Yeah, like a lot of our teams. So MLB, we have very technical teams here. So like a lot of application data that's being written from an application into their back-end database. Sometimes they want us to pull that in, and we don't want to. We don't need to go through the whole process of bringing that data from Postgres, from MySQL into BigQuery. We can just connect to Postgres. We can connect to MySQL. Looker's great connecting to mostly every database and visualize the data there. And what's powerful, like Joe said there, is it's all in real time. So when the application writes the data to the database, we visualize it right ahead in Looker. And what we've done there in some cases is we've done a lot of real-time reporting where, like maybe for some of our sales, a business user can pop open that dashboard on their monitor or on their TV screen, leave it open all day, and set it to auto refresh. So every minute, every 5 minutes, they're seeing their updated sales without even clicking a button, which has been great for us, especially at certain points of the year around opening day, for example.
Yeah, great. I don't see any additional questions. So maybe just let's close on, you guys have all of the migration and modernization behind you. You've done it. Thinking about, again, people who are considering making this journey, like is there anything you would have done differently? Anything that you learned through the process that you can share with folks that might benefit them? Maybe save some aggravation or pitfalls that you guys encountered.
I think mainly just working with your users to like get them to think differently. Like I think that's the main keys. Like think better. How can you make your reports better, more actionable, so they can get better insights and everything. It's like we went to like the Looker Joint conference a couple of years ago, and I think the big thing was us like change the data culture at your company, like get them to think data. And data is important. Data drives all the decision makings, informed decisions.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, and that's definitely what I was going to go with. And then I would say, second to that, don't be afraid and just kind of go for it. I think at first, me personally, I was scared of breaking this. I was scared of, upsetting this user, worried about that, maybe especially too because this migration started when I was brand new at the company. And, now looking back, I said, maybe I could have been a little bit more aggressive. Maybe we could have just said, hey, instead of waiting 2 months to migrate this, we could have done that a little sooner and pushed the process along. We were able to identify very early on that Looker was the right tool. And I think once we did that, and that would be my suggestion, is kind of go for it. Your users are going to pick it up. They're going to love it. And just roll with it and kind of build off that momentum that comes from the start.
Love it. That's great. Well, awesome, guys. I can't thank you enough for your insights and all the stuff you've done with us. On the page is some of that stuff that we've got on the screen. So we've done a case study with MLB that talks a lot about what we talked about today. If you want to reference that, other information out there as well. Thanks again, guys. Thanks everyone for joining us online. That brings us to a close, and thanks again.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.